Many people, when they see impressive photos, can easily give credit to the camera, some luck, or even worse, this must be AI. But today I'm gonna show you what really goes on inside the mind of a landscape photographer and take you with me on location. But did you know that the work actually starts even before heading out? And we have to start with the plan. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not the best plan person there is, especially based on that very unscientific psychology test. And it might come as a surprise for you, but the location isn't actually the most important thing for me to consider. That is because I choose where to shoot depending on what weather I'm going to be experiencing. I mean, it wouldn't really make sense for me to hike hours and hours on top of mountains if I can't see shit. There are plenty of weather apps at your disposal, so just take your pick. But personally for me, I will just take reference from my local observatory here in Hong Kong. Windy and clear outside. And after taking a look at the weather forecast, I'll choose which type of photos work best for those given conditions. Sunny days could make for great hiking days because of all the impressive views, and gloomy, stormy days could make for good seascapes because of the atmosphere. Deciding which particular place to shoot at on that day mainly just boils down to two things. Do I want to explore a new trail that I haven't been to before? Or do I want to revisit old locations and improve on past compositions? But what is important to highlight here is to always have that habit of scouting whenever you can and understanding the unfair advantages of your local neighborhood. For example, Hong Kong is a very small city. The mountains aren't very tall, they don't even exceed 1,000 meters. But it is very diverse, even from a landscape photography perspective. We have coastal views and islands all the way to mountains and country parks. And it doesn't take very long for you to get there, even from the city. So keep exploring, and build that mental catalog of where to go on a particular day. Before heading out, I like to use Google Earth to have some form of pre-visual of the trail, especially for new hikes because I don't want to get lost or be like Tim who has hypothermia. So drop that yellow man on the trail to see what kind of views you'll be getting. So for today, I've decided to explore the Sai Kung Country Park because I haven't been there for a while. For more advanced planning, you can use apps like Photo Pills, which I personally use for my moon alignments or Milky Way photography. For general sunset or sunrises, I don't really use photo pills that much because for me, as long as I already know the general direction of the sun, that's already enough. It's not completely necessary for me to know the exact location of the sun at a particular time, but I will just consider how the lighting will shape the landscapes. Backlighting will introduce some silhouettes and high contrast, and side lighting will have a good mix of the highlights and shadows, giving off that 3D look in your photos because of that increased depth perception. In terms of gear, lens selection is probably the most fun part to talk about, and I try to be smart about it. I'm getting old, back and knee pain is already a common topic amongst my friends, so I try to carry less gear as I can. And for the most part, I get by with just a 24 to 70mm lens. My video camera has a 16 to 35mm lens, so I try to swap them out whenever I want a wider shot in terms of my landscape photos. But as you saw a while ago from Google Earth, the location that I'm visiting has a lot of open views and far-reaching landscapes. So today, I will be bringing with me the 100 to 400 telephoto, and I bring this very selectively depending on the type of shots that I want and the location that I'm going to. So for example, if I want a Milky Way photo shot or street photography, I will bring with me fast prime lenses so that I can open up the aperture and collect more light. You may notice that I've been using a lot more drone footage in my clips, and that is because after 2 years I finally decided not to use this drone as a paperweight and had myself registered here in Hong Kong. And I do think they're very good B-roll, especially for wide-angle cinematic establishing shots. And particularly for today's hike, there's going to be a special use case for the drone. Tripods. I hate them. I do think that they get away in the photography, and I find it very troublesome to always change up your compositions, especially if your camera is already locked in. But even though I have a love-hate relationship with this thing, I do recognize its importance in photography, especially as the sun gets lower and you have less light in your scene. You want to stabilize your camera after all. For my general photography, I don't really use a lot of accessories. I think they're pretty much supplementary at this point. You know, like ND or CPL filters, a remote trigger cable, a rocket blower, even though it's important to clean your sensors. But some common sense ones would be a headlight, especially if you're hiking down after the sunset or before the sunrise. You want to see where you're going after all and avoid some accidents. And you may also want to consider to bring around with you some extra batteries and SD cards, especially you want to make sure that your camera is operating and your files are safe and handy. And those are all the gears that I consider to carry around with me. So I think it's time to go on location and explore ourselves a country park. So today I'm going to be giving myself a couple of hours before the sunset. And as you can see behind, there's going to be some impressive landscape formations and a beautiful reservoir view. And I don't know if you can see, there's going to be a tiny rock over there in the distance. And that's going to be where I'm headed over for the sunset later on. And then I'm going to be standing on top of that rock and fly my drone around. I think it's going to be a pretty sunset shot. So of course, all that just to say, try to arrive your location very early so that you wouldn't be running around like headless chickens trying to find your compositions. Alright, so as I arrived at the checkpoint of this hike, I absolutely got stunned with the impressive views behind. And you can see over there is going to be Sharp Peak, which is the steepest mountain here in Hong Kong. And then there is some very nice coastal views and beaches in the distance, which I thought would be a good spot to talk about the next agenda, which is to give some on-location tips when you're doing some landscape photography. So the very first thing that I try to consider for my photos is to have a strong subject matter. Now, I don't really want to think too much about this point because usually as long as something already attracts my attention, I'm going to trust my gut and already think that it's going to be strong enough for a photo. But as a general rule of thumb, I try to find for interesting shapes, some patterns, or the way that light interacts with the surrounding landscapes. For example, over there, as I mentioned, Sharp Peak is going to be a potential subject already because it has a very prominent shape within the background. And then when I think that I already have the shot, I try to take it up a next level and then try to do better. But what I really mean by this is to keep an open mind with your compositions. If you already have a set shot in mind, try to move around your compositions. If you already shot at eye level, then try to shoot low so that you can emphasize your foregrounds, or you can try to find some higher vantage points, or even shoot through objects for a better framing. Even though you're taking the same subject, you can find different compositions to support it. I think for now, this side calls for using the telephoto lens, particularly because I still have some harsh lighting, so I don't really want to include so much of the sky, especially there's not a lot of clouds anyway. So I want to zoom into the perspective quite a bit and then focus more on the layers formed by the different landscapes. And then because I'm facing the sea, there's actually a lot of sea haze, which helps add that layer of separation, and then it looks like the landscapes are fading away all the way into the distance. In terms of camera settings for my landscape photos, most of the time, let's say 75% for a very non-scientific number, I'm going to be shooting in aperture priority, because for most use cases, the shutter speed is going to be of less importance because there's really not a lot of things going on within the frame. So that is really to say that you don't really need to be shooting in manual mode all the time just to say that you're going to be a good photographer. But I will highlight the importance of understanding the interactions of the exposure triangle and how it really impacts the way your image will look. In terms of getting the correct exposure, your camera will have some tools to aid you, and I'm going to be highlighting two in this video, which is going to be your histogram and the zebras functions. So the histogram is basically just a visual representation of the brightness values of the pixels within your frame. It might look very complicated, but you really just have to avoid having spikes within either sides of your edges, because this would mean that you're already blowing out your whites or crushing your blacks, making you lose detail and you won't be able to retrieve them in post-processing later on. So for the zebras function, this is really just a warning trigger that you're already blowing out your highlights. So do turn these on within your cameras, and then you're going to be nailing your photography exposure every single shot. One more important tip is that landscape photographers, we seldom shoot in JPEGs because we like it raw. And shooting in RAW will give you as much detail and information later on to work with when you're post-processing your images. Personally, for me, whenever I take a photo and then look at the JPEGs, it really seldom does the views justice. And that is why editing is quite important in my photography workflow, so that I can better shape the image into how I originally intended it to be when I shot the photo. Right now, I am making my way to that rock formation that I mentioned a while ago where I want to take a drone selfie. I'm running out of time. I spent too much time filming these tips a while ago, and now it's approaching golden hour already. But I think we're gonna make it in time. Alright, just arrived at Kam Koi Shek Teng viewing point, and there are still people taking their drone selfies over here. So I'm just gonna wait my turn. And man, when the light is really soft, just very impressive layering of the landscapes. So it's time to fly the drone. I'm already on top of the rock all by myself. And see, the sunset is still there. Ah, what a nice day. So the sunset today isn't really as colorful as I hoped for. I would have hoped for like more vibrant oranges or reds in the sky, but I think it's still a shot that works out quite okay because I can just really focus on some minimalist compositions, which is usually my preferred approach whenever I have a clear sky without any clouds. So yeah, as I mentioned a while ago, just take your time, don't rush everything. And right now the people around are gone, so very peaceful moment, and that's why I really love taking the landscape at this time of the hour. You just feel more peaceful, tranquil, and then you can just soak into the silence of nature. If you enjoyed this video, do like and subscribe. I did try to make this video quite informative, but still on the practical end. So I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.